What's up, guys? Q&A time for October 30th, 2017. Had some Facebook questions today and then actually an Instagram question too, so we'll do all of them. I'll do the Instagram one real quick first just so I don't forget. That's actually kind of a long question. I'll just kind of generalize it. They asked about holy basil extract. It's just a general adaptogenic herb and for testosterone and then its effects on sperm production. So for testosterone, there have been some studies that have shown it to increase testosterone from what I remember, but they were animal studies. So again, that's one of those things that's hard to say how effective that, how that really translates. And even then, a lot of herbs and things that increase testosterone, it's not to any significant extent that would probably make any noticeable difference. I mean, something's better than nothing, but yeah, I don't know that it would be that would be a reason to use it. And there were also at least one study that I know of that showed it lowering sperm count, so yeah, that's definitely a valid question. If that's something that you're worried about, or if that's something that you want, one way or the other, that could be, could be worth adding. As just a general adaptation, I mean, it has a lot of positives on immunity. So that's going to be, the main thing, is just immune health in general. That's probably more the reason I would use it. And also has ursolic acid in it, which that's the main, the main component that a lot of people are after in the extract. It's, supposedly has positive effects on blood glucose and insulin sensitivity and things of that nature too. So if you get the ursolic acid out of there, that could potentially be beneficial. All right, let's see here. All right, question. This is there's two of them and they're really hard to answer because I don't think there's actually a perfect answer for this, but I'll just give a little bit of insight. What would you consider the minimum effective dose of exogenous insulin to allow localized IGF increases when used alongside growth hormone? So they're talking about just smaller, more frequent dosing alongside growth hormone. I assume that's what the question means. The problem I have with this is that it says minimum effective dose. I don't know that there's any way that we could, that we'd be able to tell that. I mean, for growth hormone, I think that it's safe to say, an IU or two per dosing is probably going to be a minimum. Usually 2 is pretty, for people that are microdosing or going more often, 1 to 2 is pretty common. But I mean, for insulin, I don't think that anyone really knows what the minimum effective dose is, because we know that it has localized IGF, activity, but that's at a pretty low dose, so it's hard to say what dose you would actually be getting any benefit from. I mean, you could argue you're always getting benefit, it's just whether or not it's really going to be noticeable. So yeah, I mean, I don't know that there's a really good answer for that. I've actually seen both sides of it. People talk about it, seen people say a lot lower, people say a lot higher. I would assume on the lower side it's still effective, just because any dose is going to have that increased effect. At least it should. All right. Do you feel that, and this is the same person, bonus question, do you feel that the in vitro IGF binding affinity of insulin analogs has any carryover to the real life use, such as Lantus having massively higher binding affinity to IGF receptors than the R-type? So meaning Lantus long acting, that's not the only one specifically, but R-type being quicker, fast acting, or medium, at least, medium to fast. This is another one. It's like, how does this translate into practical application? I don't know. I don't know that anyone knows. I mean, on paper it looks good. On paper you would use both. I mean, you would use the longer acting to control insulin sensitivity and make sure beta cells aren't overtaxed. Just as just a general blanket because it's so long acting, and then the faster acting can go with the actual carbohydrate boluses, whereas and then you have growth hormone in the background, which is raising blood glucose as well, and the Lantus would help also control that. But I mean, as far as IGF binding affinity goes, we know it's there. We know that the longer actings, Lantus, for example, have a higher binding affinity. There's actually, from what I remember, and this isn't something I've looked at for a while as far as the research goes, but from what I remember, that also was the case with other long actings, though I think Lantus is just so commonly used that that's probably why we're asking. I don't know that anyone uses anything else. So again, I don't know that there's really a way to answer that. It's not like there was a case study done or a study done where they said, here's this much Lantus, here's this much R-type, and everything else in your life's entirely the same, and they saw what has the most benefit. I mean, like what put on the most muscle. I'm not really sure that, there's probably never be any kind of study like that, so that's really hard to say, but ideally, both together would make the most sense. And to the person asking, they know how that works, so good question, though. That is a good question. I just don't know if there's any good way to answer it. So I was thinking about it today, but I couldn't think of really a good answer for it, other than we know that that's what happens. All right. I always hear that one of the best times to take insulin and growth hormone is peri-workout, but depending on the type of insulin that you use, whether it's something like Humulin R or Humalog, how would you time your growth hormone and insulin around your workout? It's not going to be, depending on the type, Humulin R and Humalog, the timing is going to be pretty close to the same. The R obviously is a little bit slower, but just, the old adage, 1 IU per 10 grams of carbohydrates, pretty standard, and that's pretty much going to go here. See, how would you... The insulin could be pre and post pretty easily if you have, peri-workout carbs, and post-workout carbs be pre and post pretty easily. There's still going to be a little overlap there for the insulin lingering, but the peaks are going to be pretty much out, especially using Humalog. It'll peak, and then you get another peak again post-workout. But as far as the growth hormone goes, if you do pre and post, it's still going to have pretty good amount of overlap between the two. But that, you can still do it that way. Have your growth hormone, your serum levels pretty high that whole entire time. So you could go pre and post with both the growth and the insulin. But there's not really, there's not really any other way to do it other than that if you're just talking about around the workout. But there's plenty of in general, there are other ways to use it. Even the R or Humalog, there's other ways to do it. It's just not around the workout. You're pretty limited in that case, unless you wanted to do. The only other thing that's really going to vary from what I'm saying is the dosing, and that's just going to depend on carbohydrate intake because you're pretty limited there. You can only go so high on it with, depending on carb intake. So. The better question might have been what is the best timing, but for both, but that's already been answered a couple times, I think. Sorry, I kind of babbled on that one. Best overall hamstring and quad exercises in your opinion, also how to grow stubborn calves. Well, my calves still aren't that good, so I don't know if I'm the best person to ask, but they have grown. They went from sucky to just kind of sucky. Hamstrings and quads, I still like squats. That's just me personally, and I think you can adjust high bar, low bar depending on what your needs are. A lot of people that squat a lot of high bar typically have really good quads, or squat a lot of low bar, have good hamstrings and glutes. But I mean, I don't really think that. I mean, I think that that's pretty much the way to go. That's if you can create tension properly and if you can maintain tension throughout the movement. It's not just about adding tons of weight, because if you have good tension, you can do tons of weight and create tension at the same time. So I don't really think there's anything better than that, to be honest. But if you want to separate them, strictly separate them, I would say RDLs for hamstrings, Romanian deadlift, stiff leg deadlift, some variation of that. And then for quads, I would probably say leg presses with just, varying your stance, lower stance, feet maybe a little close together, point the toes out, in, out, depending on how you want to hit the quad. But really, when it comes to, in that case, when you're training quads, it's really about how you're putting pressure on your feet on the platform of the leg press. When you're driving up, you don't want your heel lifting necessarily. You want to try to keep, and this depends on ankle flexibility too. Your range of motion as you're coming down, your range of motion is going to stop basically when your ankle doesn't bend anymore. If you get here and your heel starts lifting, now you're, pretty much done at that point. You can still drive from that point, because there are squat variations and hack squat variations, stuff where you press off your toes, but it's a little bit trickier to execute. So I would say just a leg press like that, feet lower, maybe a little bit inside shoulder width, and then find a good quad tension and stick to that, or just do squats. Okay, how would a large male, say 300 plus pounds, transform into bodybuilding? What would be the first step in the process be? How would said individual keep the muscle mass primarily, and what do you see as people's largest hurdle from dieting down? I think a lot of larger people like me get nervous when we even think about the process. I think that's kind of common though, just for anyone that sees like a large goal in front of them. I don't know what other term to use, large weight loss in front of them. Because you look at yourself, realistically, hey, to be in decent condition or body fat that I want to be, I'm going to have to lose 50 pounds, or I'm going to have to lose, whatever. Maybe I have to lose 75 pounds. So that's kind of a daunting task. And it's the same with any other person that hasn't necessarily been there before. They can't see the end goal because there's so many steps in between that it's just hard for them to kind of envision it. You just start, man. That's it. You need to establish 95% of the time, these people in that scene, powerlifting especially, they don't necessarily have set macros. They don't have any idea of what their calorie intake is. They do phases of nutrition, when they want to get bigger or weigh more, for maybe they compete at a higher weight and they're stronger at a higher weight because they have more leverage. So they just eat more. And they have a pretty general idea of what they have to do to gain weight and lose weight, in a general sense. But, if you'd be surprised, normally somebody like that, if they establish decent macros, establish that set point and start as high as you can, this shit's going to fall off. It's going to literally just melt off you. I remember a guy specifically that I used to talk to him online a while. Wasn't like a client of mine directly, but I kind of followed the process, and he was, really good elite level powerlifter, but his weight got too heavy. He's worried about his health. He still maybe wanted to compete in powerlifting, just in a lower weight class, but he was really, really worried about his health, like I said, and he's like, I got to do this. I got to lose this weight. So he started chipping away at it, and I helped him a little bit along the way. This is like when I was first starting to help people. I was probably, I don't know. I was young. I wasn't even 20, I don't think. It's probably 19, 18, something like that. But he's like, give me some tips. I know you're getting into bodybuilding and nutrition and all this stuff. I probably had a log on some forum or something, who knows. And Yeah, and he did it, just basic macro counting, basic calorie deficit, and then start adding cardio when it was needed. And then the crazy thing was he felt so much better that his training got better. And then all the nagging health stuff, blood pressure, blood sugar, lipids, all that shit just went. Just got better and better and better and better and better. Just from losing body weight, joints felt better, and so on and so forth. And he was still really strong. He ended up, I think he ended up losing like 65 pounds, but he wasn't quite as strong as when he started, but he was, ratios of body weight to strength, he was stronger when he was done because it was a slow process. He went through it. I would suggest, I'm not pimping myself out or anything, but who the person asking this knows me well enough that, if you ever wanted to venture down that road and you needed someone for guidance, you could let me know. But the biggest thing is get a consistent program. I would say, get a consistent program. Start with a high macro starting point. Take your body weight and you're going to have a good amount of body fat, but you could take your body weight and multiply it by 12 to 15. That's your starting calories. Get about 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, which is still plenty because your lean body mass is well under what your body weight is. And then fill in the rest of the calories with carbs and fat and just literally start there. Don't even add any cardio. Start there, see what happens. Watch your weight, and then you're going to see, hey, do I need less calories, more calories? Do I need to add cardio, take cardio away, add cardio in? But you have to start, and you have to have a consistent point of reference. And beyond that, it's scary. It's just like I said, it's just such far off in the future that it's hard to imagine. But definitely has a lot of benefits if you want to get that body weight down. And just like to add to that here at the end, you mentioned bodybuilding. I don't know if you mean competitive or you just mean that closer to that lifestyle, but all the people I've seen diet down from like 300 plus and 350 or whatever they are, they're jacked as fuck when they get down. They're might not be the prettiest thing ever. They might find out they don't have the most beautiful shape ever. They don't have a small waist or whatever, but they're pretty fucking big and look pretty big. So you got that going on, at least. What would you rather fight? A one horse sized duck or 10 duck sized horses? This is a good question. I'd probably say the one horse sized duck. Ducks are kind of scary. At least geese are, but kind of mean. Swans, they're assholes. But I would say one at least. I couldn't see getting hit from all different directions. I would have to go with one. And I think that's a little bit better chance of survival at that point. That's a really big duck, but I feel like if I could just avoid getting, scooped up in its beak long enough, I could find its weakness and take him out. Hopefully. Okay, a couple more. How do you decide what to put in a client's intra-workout drink? That's a good question. Part of it's budget. People, you put like 900 things in an intra-workout drink, but it's just a budget thing for a lot of people. Other one would be, the base of most of them is gonna be something like essential amino acids or a complete protein source. If I have them eating a lot of meals or not a lot of meals, but they're eating close to their workout, I might just put EAAs in there. They don't really need the complete protein source. If they have the budget for it, if they want that little extra edge, most people do, I might add a complete protein source to it, like whey isolate or hydrolysis. That's kind of a judgment call on my part. And then beyond that point, that's when you start adding other stuff. So do they need carbohydrates? If they have a really hard carbohydrate or high carbohydrate diet, high intake, I'll probably put some in there just to distribute it out, better partitioning, and so on and so forth. And then it just takes away from the meals a little bit if their intake's really high. It's And then, do they have workouts that are really demanding, that are demanding enough for any use for intra-workout carbs? Some people do. Some people that are more beginners, or novices, I don't even put them in there just because I don't see it's necessary. Their workout intensity is probably not high enough, and it's just a waste of money. So I don't put them in there. And they're in unless again their intake's really high, like I said. And then you get into all the ergogenic aids, all the little goodies. Stuff, there's some staples like citrulline, I think is a really good one. And some of this stuff can be used pre-workout too, Hydromax glycerol. If you want to volumizing strength athletes, and well, that's another thing. Strength athletes and performance athletes, some of this stuff I don't add because I don't necessarily want them to have a huge giant pump where they can't, do full range of motion. So like, I'm not going to add tons of agmatine. I'm not going to add a bunch of Hydromax glycerol. I'm not going to add nitrates and stuff like that. But strictly for the physique athlete, I like to add things like citrulline, malate, and I like to add Hydromax glycerol in there pre-workout if possible. I like agmatine for the right person, for hydration. If they have problems with cramping, things like that, we might add taurine in, and then there's some other unnecessary things that you could add depending on their budget and their needs. Beta alanine, that's one that's not super necessary, but it can be useful. It has a very small benefit to it, but if they have a lot of high rep work, if they have a lot of really intense training, that's a lot of lactic acid buildup, I might add that in, or if their budget's high enough, I just add that in. But yeah, look at what the ingredients actually do. Look at their training, and what does their training entail, and what is their goal, and you can kind of decide instead of just haphazardly throwing stuff in there. Although a lot of the ingredients obviously have crossover between different goals. All right. GH pulse protocol with basal and rapid insulin. What would you say is optimal? 2 IUs waking with basal, 2 IUs pre-workout with rapid, 2 IUs pre-bed with basal. Well, the basal's going to be kind of just overlapping the whole time. So you could go morning and night with that, or about, if it's something like Lantus, about 12 hours apart. Just make it even, 12 and 12. That's going to be kind of overlapping. That's not necessarily going to determine the fast acting or the rapid dose. Rapid would be just more dependent on carb intake in the meals. You could put it with every single carb meal. You have to kind of know your blood sugar, like your tendencies and blood sugar and how your pancreas acts and stuff in this case, just to kind of determine the dose. But you could say, just if you want to be on the safe end, something like 12 carbs per IU, or 10 even, depending on how insulin sensitive you are. And then with each carb meal, there's nothing, you could do that for sure. So yeah, it might be if you have carbs pre-post and maybe one other meal, then you might have 3. You might do it 3 times. And then with the insulin, the GH morning, if you want to go morning pre-post, morning pre before bed. Yeah, that's, 3 doses is pretty good if you're going to do that type of pulsing protocol and looking for the localized IGF. You could even go up to 4. It just depends on practicality. And kind of depends on the person's, practicality. That's not really practical for a lot of people. So, but some people it might be. You're looking at 3 to 4 probably, and about 2 units each time would be a good place to start. And then obviously the insulin is just totally going to depend on the person as far as like how much. But I think I gave you a general idea of how you would do that. That's it, guys. I'm almost at 25 minutes here. So I'm going to cut it off here. There was a couple more questions, but they're past my my mark at the end. So I'll make sure I get to those people. Sorry guys that I got to cut this off. Video's getting too long and I've got some other emails and stuff to get done. So till next week, we will be back at it and signing off.